The galaxy shook under the authority of these creatures are a group of expert assassins. Fearful in innumerable stellar systems were unparalleled in their lethal abilities, an effectiveness with which they functioned in the silently striking shadows that leave no survivors to describe their experiences. Whole societies became obedient. An unspoken rule.
Aware that swift would result from disobedience. These assassins were taught to destroy have a single goal since childhood: to remove dangers and preserve their authority in the galaxy. Legends circulated about his reputation, of leaders going missing overnight planets and disappearing without a trace, submitting to authority without a single fight. None ventured to doubt their techniques or their strength. They weren't simply murderers. They were enforcing a harsh order that guarantees the galaxy stayed under their authority out of fear. Line systems, as well as the galaxy's residents, were aware that rebellion was a death penalty. Their ascent to authority was methodical. Centuries ago, a broken galaxy suffered from ongoing conflicts, and apart from this mayhem, a covert group that trains assassins covertly and using them to get rid of important people, an opposing group's order was restored by these focused assaults. However, fear was the basis for this edict. The quantity and power of assassins increased, becoming the unseen overlords in the end. Of the galaxy's organization penetrated all tiers of authority, preventing any planet from escaping their tactics, and their reach were horrifyingly accurate with sophisticated technology in conjunction with centuries-old combat methods. They turned into the ideal murderers. They may follow a target located light years away, avoids the safest protection, and carry out their mission without leaving any traces behind. Mastery of deceit and stealth made even the strongest can't stop them. The galactic powers' enormous fleets and armies were powerless against the leaders, were swapped out with puppets. Resistance and rulers were defeated earlier. It might start with the galaxy's residents. This was life beneath the planets under assassins' dominion, paid well. Tributes, in order to prevent drawing their trade routes, were strictly monitored, tracked, with complete shipments vanishing if considered a danger. The assassins didn't have to keep up big armies. The potential for their intervention was sufficient to impose. Fear of obedience became their greatest strong weapon that works better than any. This domination produced either a fleet or weapons. A galaxy of planets known as Silence functioned in quiet obedience from their leaders, as well fearful to express disapproval. The galactic, once a strong governing body, the council was diminished to a purely symbolic organization. Helpless in the face of the assassins' dark impact, the council members directly were continuously monitored, aware that any effort to bring the galaxy together opposing the assassins would lead to their prompt removal. Yet in the midst of the terror, whispers started to spread. The word about a minor, unimpressive planet on the galaxy's periphery. Earth has traditionally been viewed as a primitive planet. For the most part, Backwater had avoided the assassins, observed that it lacks sophisticated technology, and its remote location rendered it unimportant in the grand galactic affairs plan. But other assassins' rule caused planets to struggle. Rule Earth stayed silent and unaltered. Witnessing the chaos in the galaxy from a distance, this anonymity turned into the biggest protect. The assassins' attention on more prominent systems had no justification for view the planet as a danger to Earth's residents, who are not aware of the assassins' existence, carried on with their lives in comparatively tranquility. But what the assassins didn't realize, Earth has a secret, one that would ultimately pose a challenge. Their whole Ryan concealed in the darkness of this modest world was anything the galaxy had never previously come across. Earth had its own covert customs, fight and discipline, traditional methods refined over thousands of years, whereas the assassins depended on technology and was overpowered. Earth's warriors had grown afraid. Abilities based on tolerance and flexibility and accuracy among these warriors, one the individual had achieved unmatched mastery, represents a degree of proficiency that the lords of the galaxy defied rationality. Rejected Earth as unimportant, failing to observe the silent power beneath. The assassins have been on the surface for millennia. Thought they were unbeatable, unopposed and unstoppable. As of yet, in their conceit, they had failed to notice that the basic fact is that not all power is loud. Silence holds power as it awaits the ideal time to attack. The assassins' fear and power were the foundations of the reign. Ready to take on a task that could never had expected, Earth, long regarded as the planet, was silent and inconspicuous. Unlike the galaxy's major forces, lacked the vast fleets and sophisticated technologies from other civilizations. Its inhabitants appeared more detached and preoccupied with their own world. From the extensive interstellar affairs, but within its borders, and the traditional discipline had been subtly developed. A skill for fighting and surviving things didn't need any fanfare or acknowledgement that this field was not. The galaxy is aware of it, but its effectiveness would quickly change the balance of power. the person who symbolized the apex of this unlike the assassins. Tradition reigned over the galaxy in secret and instructed in techniques intended to master this person's environment, body, and mind. Shown mastery of simplicity place galactic killers depended on complex instruments and overwhelming technological benefits that this person excelled by transforming the surroundings turns into a weapon with every motion. The decision was thoughtful, effective, and untraceable. The history of Earth had a major part in forming this distinct field. Its inhabitants had for thousands of years created military tactics that placed a high value on tolerance, flexibility, and accuracy rather than strength. The lessons were transmitted in silence. Conducted in isolated areas and hardened by the world's issues, these frequently required fortitude. In contrast to the assassin's strength was based on an extensive resource network on Earth's scarcity. Trained warriors learned how to depend on their intuition and creativity. This silent mastery was developed from Earth's perspective in the galaxy. Relative obscurity made it possible for its customs to change without disruption. The planet's absence of curiosity in the politics of the galaxy made it most interstellar recordings contain a footnote. The galaxy's attention for centuries stayed on more important systems, permitting Earth to flourish in its thought inconsequential. This detachment, but was not the result of Earth's inhabitants' ignorance. Recognized the brittleness of peace and the risks of making needless drawings by coming across as unremarkable. They stayed away from the disputes that had destroyed a great number of the assassins and their civilization's arrogance completely disregarded Earth too. For them, it was a worthless world. This is neither a resource nor a threat. Inaccuracy would turn out to be one of their biggest mistakes. The anonymity of Earth protected not just its citizens but also the assassin's reign of terror, and its secrets stretched over the majority of the galaxy. Although they never looked at this little blue planet under which other worlds shuddered, Earth subtly upheld its dominance. Independence at the point of disturbance arrived unexpectedly. The assassins of the galaxy, functioning with their typical level of effectiveness, targeted a diplomat from Earth. Thinking the planet to be a simple mark for their approach was predicated on the idea that Earth's, since there were no obvious defenses, it had no method to thwart this process, such as many others before. It was intended to convey a message that no one could ignore, reach, but the outcome was far from what they expected the interference to be. Was the assassins quick and decisive? Well thought out plans fell apart as their agents vanished one by one, for when they initially came across an enemy who outpaced their speed computations, predicted their tactics, and eliminated all traces of the accuracy of their mission, was disassembled, was different from anything they had came across. The arrogant assassins' self-esteem, as the galaxy's most skilled murderers discovered, surpassed in a manner that they were unable to understand the consequences of this failure. The operation gave the assassins additional more queries than responses they had. Earth was undervalued, but more crucially, they had misjudged the person in charge of preventing this enigmatic figure. Is their mission worked in total secrecy, leaving behind no proof other than the lack of the assassin's loss, served as the catalyst for whispers inside the company as questions started to surface in the minds of even their most self-assured leaders. The meeting wasn't a coincidence. A guardian was the one who had stepped in. Earthly training did not aim for glory, but this function had been prepared for protection. A long time before the galaxy noticed, unlike the assassins who, the planet flourished by creating fear, this person depended on accuracy and discipline by simply employing what was required in order to accomplish their goal. The techniques were not concerned with dominance but rather with balance. While guaranteeing global security, they were known as the assassins, although weren't used to failing at their in reaction to the mission's failure. Earth had changed from an immediate and hostile target identified as an outlier in their generally flawless record of what they was unaware that this attention was precisely what their enemy possessed. Expected for the first time, the target of the assassins was someone who recognized the value of patience and getting ready for someone who witnessed their every action taken prior to this. Silent warrior who has been taught to blend in shadows stood for the opposite of as the assassins get closer. They wanted to gain control by using terror. A person looked for peace by strategic move by the assassins who felt that they were now superior. Battling a rival who had learned to be humble and noticing this variation in philosophy and strategy and goal would end to becoming their downfall. Earth kept quiet while the assassins regrouped without realizing what they had done. Were being closely observed by their each phase was determined by their hubris that could lead them to fall into a trap, not observe the galaxy unaware of this little planet's quiet power kept considering Earth to be an after giving it some thought. The reality was being obvious to the killers. There was more to Earth than met the eye, and the person who had stepped in was not like anything they've ever came across. The assassin degraded by Their decision to fail on Earth reacted to this with measured aggression. Planet that was previously disregarded as something inconsequential was now viewed as a danger. They sent out a team to assert their superiority. Among their most proficient agents outfitted with cutting-edge technologies and weapons to find and destroy the force responsible for their mission's failure, sure of their dominance. They considered this to be a simple action to repair their reputation, to dispel any uncertainty regarding their authority throughout the galaxy. As the assassins reached Earth, they came across anything that instantly made this distinguishing their advanced reconnaissance tools have trouble give lucid readings. It appeared as though the planet itself opposed their efforts to break through its secrets. The agents started their search using their customary effectiveness based on their background and instruments to find their objective. What they didn't expect was that their every action was being watched by their technological benefit that had guaranteed their supremacy throughout in a world where galaxy was suddenly a burden, where accuracy and nuance were more important than brute force, is the person in charge. For the protection of Earth recognized the assassins much more skilled than they were comprehend their new enemy's dependency on technology and consistency. They were exposed to someone by their patterns, who had become proficient readers and taking use of flaws in contrast to the assassins looking for quick outcomes by using overwhelming force against this adversary depended on patience. Comprehending the significance of holding out for the ideal moment to do the assassins' usual to engendering terror and dominating results were now functioning in a state of doubt. As they carried on their search, the assassins started to encounter misfortunes that were inexplicable. Equipment broke out at a crucial times when their preparations were interrupted by seemingly insignificant factors and their confidence started to falter. These disruptions were not sporadic, rather, they were meticulously planned by the person they intended to get rid of. For the first time, the assassins discovered outwitted them in ways they were unable to forecast or manage. Their techniques, which had been so successful in combating other civilizations, were proven to be pointless versus a rival who was more knowledgeable about them than they realized this for themselves. Dispute uncovered a basic. The assassins' divergent philosophical views worked on the assumption that their authority was certain, that their sophisticated, unmatched training combined with technology made they were unbeatable, and had never encountered an adversary who did not see war as a demonstration of power, but as a way to attaining equilibrium with their opponent's behavior was not driven by fear or the need for authority, but by a dedication to safeguarding and maintaining this viewpoint that was different from the assassins, their adversary, a benefit they were unable to understand. The assassins' annoyance increased as their operational losses increased. Who had never experienced mission failure started to question their skills, and once thought to be flawless tools became untrustworthy. The psychological effects of these shortcomings were just as important as the physical cost for a successful group. On displaying vulnerability in this novel reality seemed strange and profoundly disturbing. The assassins, who had constructed their track record of removing dangers prior to their realization, they were now Earth's defender. Those being chased took advantage of this change in dynamics with accuracy. The assassins' self-assurance once now their greatest asset was their vulnerability. Their incapacity to adjust to an adversary who declined to participate in their terms made them open to tactics. Now, efficiency was dispersed and discouraged them from using their advanced weapons and apparatus that had guaranteed their centuries of domination were ineffectual while facing an enemy who functioned beyond their comprehension of the use of terror by assassins and intimidation that had prevented many it was pointless to have, who flourished on tolerance and flexibility. While the assassins tried to reorganize their circumstances only got worse with each. Their morale was damaged by failure, leaving them more susceptible to the psychological. They had never engaged in combat before, realized that they were being outwitted by an individual. Pivotal moment for more than just the assassins, but for the entire galaxy. For centuries, they were no longer in control. Unquestioned their strategies, unquestioned this meeting, but revealed the shortcomings in their methodology and the constraints of their dependence on technology and terror. Are the assassins who had been unbeatable, reeling from their earthly shortcomings, understood that their legitimacy as the most dreaded enforcers in the galaxy were at stake. Committed to recovering their reputation, they came up with a fresh plan. This time they wouldn't provide any space for error. A more powerful force outfitted with the most cutting-edge weapons and backed by intelligence. Elevation would quickly get rid of the unidentified danger. As they got ready for assassins' underestimated retaliation, how much damage their losses have already caused on their company's shortcomings on Earth had not been overlooked by the factions of galaxies. Whispers of their susceptibility started to spread, even among their own ranks, causing minor rifts in their unity. The Retribution Force, in spite of its powerful resources, bore the burden of these doubts. That each agent was aware of the mission was a test of more than just a war. Their continued existence as a company. The operation was presented by the leadership as a display of power. Even among their own ranks, causing minor rifts in their unity, the Retribution Force, in spite of its powerful resources, bore the burden of these doubts that each agent was aware of the mission was a test of more than just a war. Their continued existence as a company. The operation was presented by the leadership as a display of power. The conceit that had always characterized their activities, they believed that Defender of Earth, despite their seeming ability, was unable to endure the tremendous might of their entire strength. Their calculations were based on the think that their cutting-edge technology and higher numbers would ensure success. But they didn't acknowledge that their reliance on physical force made the Defender well predictable. Conscious of the assassins' methods, had expected every action they took. This knowledge was not based on superior firepower or resources, but in the capacity to take advantage of the assassins' vulnerabilities. In their reliance on rigid tactics and centralized control left them open to interference from focusing on their communications. Well-thought-out plans fell apart as their systems malfunctioned, and the workers were left without guidance. The assassins were trained to rule. By means of accuracy and management, were thrown into disarray, which revealed an additional weakness in their methodology: incapacity to work efficiently in unexpected circumstances as the procedure. As they went on, the assassins started to challenge the presumptions that had directed their behavior. They were aware that their dependency on technology, although a strength in the majority of conflict, CTS has turned into a liability for their instruments and strategies intended for the effectiveness of warfare against an adversary who flourished in this realization of uncertainty expanded the fissures in their organization when workers started to lose faith in their leaders. Capacity to give the Defender's strategy to victory in order to combat the assassins was methodical, as opposed to participating in immediate conflict. They concentrated on assassins' operation dismantling Asians. One by one, every disturbance reduced the force of retribution by degrading the Defender's strength and morale. Defeating the assassins was not the strategy by force, but to outlive them by tolerance and flexibility. To reveal their weaknesses in this protracted struggle had a significant psychological influence on Swift, and the assassins were used till they now had to contend with clear-cut victories. With a rival that declined to be drawn into their military tactics, the UNC, the situation's certainty produced a feeling of unease when the assassins started to perceive dangers where none existed. Their greatest weapon, dread, was now shifted against them. The longer the fight lasted, the more the flaws of the assassin were revealed. Using fear as a control mechanism was useless against an adversary who could not be coerced into concentrating on the superiority of technology. Was challenged by a rival who functioned outside the limitations of their systems. Even their unity, which served as their greatest power, started to wane under the stress of recurrent failures. Leaders of assassins are frantic to save the operation. Increased recklessness. Choices that their attention was diverted from removing the dang to maintaining their standing, resulting in tactics that put appearance above efficiency. Of this change of direction alienated their agents, who started to doubt the proficiency of the internal discord. Leadership that had smoldering ever since their initial setback now posed a threat to rip their division of the organization. By the time when the conflict came to an end, the assassins were no longer as prevalent as they once were. Self-retaliation force that was once observed as an invincible show of strength had been methodically disassembled. Their leaders, who can't adjust to the evolving the conflict's dynamics, were left with this retreat is the only option. Signified not just the conclusion of their task on Earth, but also a pivotal moment in their group. The defeat of the assassin on Earth had extensive repercussions. It destroyed the perception emboldening of their invincibility groups around the galaxy to contest the terror that had persisted in their authority and submission. The galaxy started to fade and be replaced with a fresh understanding of opposition. The assassins who possessed control and intimidation were used to rule, now confronted a galaxy that had lost sight of considering them untouchable. This change in the dynamic cosmic power is more than just the outcome of their earthly losses, but additionally a manifestation of the constraints of the assassins' reliance on their techniques, technology, and fear. Although useful in the short-term situation, was not sustainable in the appearance of a rival who conducted with a very different perspective. The Defender's triumph wasn't merely a victory of talent, but an example of the strength of adaptability and resilience, and the readiness to question established standards. For the assassins' activities on Earth were defeated by more than 1,000,000 to 1. They were an outfit to reckon with. That formerly ruled the galaxy was now compelled to face its own vulnerability, their inability to modify their excessive dependence on fear and their undervaluation of the Defender of Earth exposed the shortcomings of their strategy. Despite their suffering, these teachings would mold their future while attempting to reconstruct their damaged image and reinterpret the assassins' position in the galaxy. Earth's defeat signaled the start of their deterioration and inability to eradicate the danger revealed not just their weaknesses, but also indicated a change in the galaxy's power dynamics held for a long time, and their dominance based on fear started to awaken to the potential for opposition to this. The awakening was gradual, rather than abrupt. Dispelling the myths that have continued to exist for centuries, the assassins have prospered because of the notion that they believed they were invincible now. Broke the repercussions of this loss reverberated throughout the worlds of the galaxy. Other groups that had previously resided under the assassins' control shadow began to reconsider their stance. The fear that had maintained their control started to fade and be replaced by cautious hope. Assassins, who had previously silenced decline with their simple existence, at this time discovered that their authority was contested by the Earth's initial fissures grew externally, breaking the base of their influence. This change of perspective was as detrimental as any military defeat. The reputation of assassins had been established on the notion of being flawless, as an unstoppable power capable of eradicating any danger. The knowledge that they could be outwitted, outmaneuvered, and finally vanquished by a single enemy attacked the heart of their identities. It revealed their reality. Denying for a long time that their power was not absolute, it was contingent upon the adherence of those they aimed to rule. Within the consequences for the organization were influential leaders who had previously. Steadfast devotion was now criticized. I have doubts about the agent's ability to carry out directives without hesitation and started to doubt the legitimacy of their mission. This internal strife undermined their cohesiveness, which makes it challenging for them to adequately address the difficulties that developed following their failure. What was once a cohesive force was now a disjointed assortment of people struggling with the consequences of their loss. The assassins' dispersion left them susceptible to outside public relations forces. The groups that had been harmed by their rule started to push back, taking control of the chance to regain their independence. Little uprisings arose all around. Everyone in the galaxy is encouraged by the awareness that the assassins weren't, however. These rebellions are unstoppable. Isolated at first, became stronger, and cooperation while the assassins were having trouble in order to keep them in check. The galaxy, once a silent witness to their supremacy, turned into a resistance battleground. The assassins' reaction to this turmoil was characterized by their desperate attempts to assert their power once more by forced demonstrations directed toward important figures within the opposition movements. But these initiatives only help to further erode their place. Each aggressive act that is inspired by the determination of those who were against them, bolstering the partnerships that were established. The assassins rebelled against their authority, who had depended on terror to keep control, discovered that they were confined in a cycle of growing hostilities. In the midst of anarchy, Earth became a representation of defiance. The protector who had vanquished the assassins were more than simply a single triumph. They turned into a beacon of wish for a reminder to the galaxy that even the most dangerous opponents could include contested. The widespread use of this emblem, it inspired people outside of the globe itself, other realms, to use comparable tactics, utilizing their special advantages to oppose the supremacy of the assassin on Earth's. A part in this change was not one of quiet yet direct leadership impact, influencing the galaxy's reaction to oppress the assassins. In the face of opposition on several fronts, were compelled to reconsider their strategy, their dependence on centralized management with cutting-edge technology. After their finest assets had evolved into, in a galaxy where liabilities are no longer fearful of them, they tried to adjust, dispersing their activities and taking a more adaptable position. Tactics, but these modifications arrived too late. The resistance's impetus had reached a tipping point already, and the assassins lacked cohesion and resources to turn it around. Their fall was hastened by the demise of their reputation. The idea of the invincibility that had kept them safe was gone for ages and replaced by an increasing consciousness of their restrictions. This change in perspective was irrevocable. Despite their efforts, factions across the galaxy refused to rebuild. Once the enforcers have submitted, the assassins of total authority discovered themselves in a galaxy negotiating for survival that didn't fear them on Earth anymore. Defender, having accomplished their objective, sank back into obscurity as a result of their behavior had altered the galaxy, yet their function was not intended to cause opposition. They remained unknown, a person whose, although their presence was felt, their influence was hardly ever observed. In this anonymity alone, incorporated into their legend, guaranteeing that their influence would last for a long time after the assassins were no longer as powerful as the galaxy that resulted from this battle was significantly altered by the assassins' once an indisputable fact. Supremacy had been swapped out for a fresh arrangement established by cooperation and resiliency of the planets, and those who had opposed them started to re-establish partnerships that put mutual support before fear. There were difficulties in this new era. However, it was distinguished by a common dedication to stop TE from returning for the assassins following their defeat, served as a lesson in power agility. Their dependence on intimidation and terror, although short-term successful, having ultimately resulted in their demise. Inability to adjust to a galaxy that is shifting had exposed them to a potential enemy, who conducted business beyond their comprehension. Earth's lessons were not limited to strategies or technology. Why? Particularly regarding the IT served as a reminder of the nature of power. Because real power isn't found in domination yet with fortitude, flexibility, and the capacity to motivate others to oppose oppression.